I am just tearing this book apart. Hey guys, it's Story. Welcome to my channel, or welcome back. I'm kicking off the exciting end of the year videos. This is going to be the worst books I read this year. I actually had a really good reading year, so it's really like the top 2 books are like the worst books ever this year, and then the rest are like 3 stars. So pretty good for me. I'm really happy about it. Sorry if you can hear the washer or dryer in the back room. Our laundry room does not have a door, so it is what it is. But let's go ahead and get into the books. If you aren't already following me on Instagram or TikTok or Goodreads, my handle is Storybook across all platforms, so let's be friends over there. Let's go ahead and get into the worst books I read this year. So I always do these lists starting with number 5, then I work my way down. So basically number 1 is the worst book I read this year, and number 5 will be like the least worst book I read this year, if that makes sense. I had a lot of 3 stars. Well, I had 4 3 stars this year, so they're all kind of sharing that 3rd place spot together, but the books in spots 1 and 2 are actually the worst books I read this year. So I'm gonna go over books 3 through 5 really quick here, since they really weren't that bad. 5 on my list is It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. I did a vlog where I read 3 popular romance books, and I had never read Colleen Hoover before, so this was my first book of hers, and yeah, didn't like it, but also kind of liked it at the same time. I guess I did give it 3.5 stars, so that's not a bad rating at all. I really just didn't know how to rate this book because it is such a personal book to the author, but I get the controversial part of Colleen Hoover. So if you are more of a book talk person, then you probably don't know that Colleen Hoover was essentially canceled at one point on BookTube. Like, no one read her books anymore, and then once Book Talk emerged again, everyone reads her books now. So if you remember that time, please let me know down below. I liked the first half because it was your typical romance book. It was super cute. I liked the couple. I liked the characters. The letters to Ellen DeGeneres didn't really bother me much. I know that's something that a lot of people talk about, being really cheesy. I didn't care about that aspect when you get to like a third of the book, or maybe halfway through, when it does a 180 on you. So basically the book makes you fall in love with these characters that are starting this new romance, and then very intense, triggering things happen. A lot of abuse, so definitely trigger warnings for sexual abuse, emotional abuse, probably so many others. So please look up the trigger warnings for this book before you read it. I was pretty disappointed in the fact that there wasn't any trigger warnings, you know, in the beginning of the book. I did listen to the audiobook. Even when people have recommended this book to me, no one ever said anything about looking up the triggers. Usually whenever I talk about books that I know have triggers and I don't want to list them out, I just say, look up the triggers. There's a ton of trigger warnings for this book. And no one's ever said that to me, you know, any YouTube videos I watched, or book talk videos, or Instagram posts, or even in person. I meet Colleen Hoover fans all the time. It's usually much younger girls, and they just don't say anything about the triggers. I realize not all of Colleen Hoover's books are like this one. I heard some are as intense, so if you want to let me know, if you are like a Colleen Hoover expert, if you want to let me know which of her books aren't as intense as this book and don't have as many triggers, please let me know down below. I would love to read those and see what I think. But as for these types of books, I'm not into, because I kind of feel like I was tricked as a reader. It felt like she made you fall in love with the characters. It was a cute rom-com, and then she uses an emotional response to these really intense things like abuse as like a plot twist, and I'm just not sure if I'm into that. I know at the very end of the book they ended up adding a little note saying that Colleen Hoover's mom went through a lot of this, and they are a lot of first-hand experiences that happened with her mom, and that's why it's so personal. So I just really didn't know how to rate it, but to be honest, I was extremely nauseous reading this book. Extremely nauseous. I have a weak stomach, and so if I would have known, I would not have picked up this book. It's just not the type of books I pick up. It's not the type of books that entertain me in any sense. So yeah, I just had to include that book on this list because it's just something. I just think her books should have trigger warnings in the front of them. I know a lot of her books have been reprinted so that they could include author's notes, and actually some stories were completely rewritten because they were just so bad, so personal, so triggering. So I just wish the publisher would have added trigger warnings whenever they did that, and I think they should. The next books I'm going to talk about are all 3 stars. So 3 stars is usually an average rating for me. I don't love the book, I don't hate it. It's just like, okay, it doesn't do anything great. Sorry if you hear my dog growling at me I'm gonna go over them quickly though, since they are 3 stars. So the first one is The Soulmate Equation by Christina Lauren. You probably know by now that I have read like 5 or 6 of Christina Lauren's books. It is a famous romance author duo, and I was sent this book as an ARC. I didn't get to it when I was first sent it, but I recently read it as an audiobook, and I just thought it was okay. I think the most intriguing part about this book was that the whole soulmate company, like collecting data to find your soulmate, I found that part so interesting, but I thought the main character was pretty boring. I thought the love interest was pretty boring, and I thought them together was pretty boring. Everything else, just like not a lot happens since it's mainly about them. Really the only part of this book I did enjoy was the actual company and the little plot twist that happens. And so yeah, it was just like an average book. I've definitely realized that I need to stray away from romance, like typical contemporary no smut romance. It's just like not entertaining to me. I just went through my collection and purged a bunch of those books. I think if I want to read those books, they just suit me better as audiobooks. So yeah, just an average book for me. Also Lost Lake by Sarah Addison Allen. Hopefully you can see that with my lights. It's kind of gloomy out today. Sarah Addison Allen is one of my favorite authors. She is a magical realism author. She writes about small southern towns with a little bit of magical realism thrown in there. There's usually a lot of characters, multiple POV, that sort of thing. I always feel like I'm in this cute, whimsical world, and it's great escapism, but this has been my least favorite by far. I know I've talked about her a ton on my channel. I've loved all her books before this one, but I just gave this one 3 stars because not a lot happens, and it's just not like her other books to me really at all. It's a summer themed book, so all of her books are themed by season, and usually she goes the fall route. Sometimes she does spring, sometimes she does winter, but this one is summer themed because they are at a lake, and we're following the owner of the area and a bunch of different people too. But I just found the magical realism aspect to be not a prominent part of the story. It was just like really boring magical realism, and I couldn't connect with the characters at all. I just found the characters to be so bland, and usually that just doesn't happen with her books. So yeah, this one was just kind of a dud for me, unfortunately. I thought it was okay. 3 stars. I mean, it's not that bad. Her Body and Other Parties. So this is a anthology, you know, women and women's bodies, a lot of other things that come with that. So like feminism, abuse, just like so many different things, but it's about women and their bodies, obviously. Some of it is magical realism, which I really enjoyed those stories, but I believe I really liked 4 of the stories, and there's like 8 or 10, I believe. So I gave this 3 stars because, again, I just don't know how to rate anthologies. I enjoyed the stories I enjoyed, but the other ones I didn't. So I just felt like I couldn't rate it below 3 and I couldn't rate it above 3. So that's why I went with that. I've always wanted to read this, and I was really excited to read it, and so I think my expectations were a little too high. This is a book that's been around on BookTube for forever, and if you like anthologies, definitely look into it. But yeah, just okay for me. And then the last one is Animal Farm by George Orwell. Trust me, I get Animal Farm. I get what it's about, the politics and all that, but it was just so boring. It was a quick audiobook. I read it in one sitting, and it was just super boring. Like, you're just following a bunch of farm animals, obviously, and it's all one big metaphor and analogies and stuff, of course, and I get it. I do, and I see why it would be popular like back when it was written. But yeah, 3 stars again because crazy happens, but also it's not like it was a horrible book. So yeah, I don't want to spend too much time on these books. I normally don't have much to say about 3 stars anyways. These next 2 books, however, I feel a type of way about. So number 2 on my list of the worst books of 2022 is The Simple Wild by K.A. Tucker. Man, do I hate this book. I hate number 1 on this list even more. This is one of those like GOAT books for a certain genre, so it's known for being like a super popular, one of the best like romance books. It just has been talked about for years, and I always knew I wanted to read it, and then I read it and was super disappointed. I just don't understand the hype whatsoever. You're basically following a girl from, I think it's like LA, maybe New York, basically like an influencer, super young, pretty girl, has always lived in the city, has never been told no, that sort of thing. And she goes to visit her dad that not really had a strong relationship with. They just don't really communicate. And he lives in Alaska, I'm pretty sure. So she goes to visit him because she finds out that he has cancer. And of course it is a romance between, you know, a super broody, good looking dude that works in the wilderness or some like dangerous job, and they're like polar opposites, but of course there's tension and they end up liking each other. My problem was this was like a weird hate to love. That's my favorite romance trope, but this was more like, you know, cut your hair while you're sleeping or steal your luggage and not give it to you for weeks. And then all of a sudden you're in love with each other and you just forget about that. Like, it was weird. They were doing like very serious pranks to each other. He literally cut her hair in her sleep, right? I'm pretty sure. Now I'm questioning myself because it's been so long since I've read it, but I just like couldn't get over it. I couldn't get into the romance. I did like him after he stopped being an asshole, but he was so mean to her that I just like could not get past it. And I didn't like any other character in the story. I didn't like where the plot was going at all. I thought it was so boring. I hated the main character. Really the only character I liked was the love interest, and he was so mean to the main character that once he was getting softer, I couldn't do it. I did not like this whatsoever. And I realized that I really don't like a main character that, you know, is the influencer type, is the girl that like just wants to take photos and doesn't understand a different way of living, that's super high maintenance, that's a spoiled brat. I don't want to follow main female characters like that. It's just not what I'm into. Yeah, this book is not good whatsoever. I think I gave it 2 stars, I'm pretty sure. Probably one of the worst romance books I've read in a while. And then last but not least, I guess it is least. Never mind. Last and least is number 1 on the list. The worst book I read this year by far is When Night Breaks by Janella Angelis. I'm very surprised this is on the list, to be honest, because I love Where Dreams Descend so much, the first book in this duology. It's on my far bookshelf over there. If I haven't posted my reorganizing my bookshelves video, I'll do that soon because you probably don't know what bookshelf I'm even talking about. It's over there. I love Where Dreams Descend. It's the first book in the series. I was so excited for this book. I bought it at full price. It's a hefty book. And let me tell you, it was so sad that I started off my year with this. I thought it was going to be a bad reading year because of that. Turns out it was a great reading year for me, but I don't know what happened with this series, to be honest. It had so much potential, so much potential. It could have been one of my favorite duologies of all time because I really did love the first book. I think I gave it 4 stars or 4.5. There was a couple small things, but it really had so much potential. I loved the world, loved the characters, love the magic system. Basically what happens is you're in a opposite world, like a polar opposite world. I don't want to give away too much in case you do want to read it, but trust me, you don't want to read past the first book. It will just ruin the series for you. But yeah, we're in a completely different world. So the first book is building up that world. You finally get used to it. You really like it by the end, and then it's just gone. Completely different place, a depressing, dark place. The main character just wasn't the same. All the characters we came to know and love in the first book are basically gone. The love interest is completely gone this entire book. The love interest is not in this entire book. And he's literally one of my favorite characters from the first book. So that was hard. Everything was just so random. The magic didn't make sense. The new characters were the worst. The worst characters in this world were all the characters that were introduced in this book and were throughout the book. The plot was so silly. The plot just went nowhere. There really wasn't a plot in my opinion. I just hated the new characters that were in it, and they were doing these like battles and these shows with the main character that were just silly and didn't matter, and they wanted you to be afraid of like the main villain. I didn't feel afraid of him whatsoever. I thought he was a silly villain, and just so many things just didn't make sense, and it was just super immature, super depressing. I am just tearing this book apart. I don't mean to hate on this book so much. It's nowhere near my expectations of this world. To give the author credit, she said she wrote this during lockdown. She wrote this during a really bad time during COVID, and the world was very depressing, but she also became very depressed. So she said she wrote this at a very low point, and you can tell, you really can. It's a very sad, depressing world, and the writing is just not the same as the first book. Even the main character didn't feel the same, and she's very, like the strong female lead that's very hopeful and powerful, and it just didn't feel like that anymore. So yeah, definitely the worst book. I gave it 1 star. I was so disappointed. I'm sure you get the gist by now, but like, I've never felt more disappointed in a book in a series in a while, because I like the first book so much. So and the characters really ruined everything for me. Like absolutely everything about the first book was just ruined with this. It took me at least a month to read this. It was so bad. I was forcing myself. I was trying so hard. And this, no, just no. No. All right, guys, those were the worst books I read this year. Please stay tuned for the best books I read this year. That video is going to be really fun and exciting to film, so I can't wait for you guys to see it. Let me know what books you read this year, what were your favorites and your worst, specifically your worst books you read this year, so I know not to read them. Like this video. If you like this video, please subscribe if you haven't already, if you feel like it. And I will see you guys for the best books of 2022. Bye.